Despite being an effective pitch that showed off what Lupin III was all about, it would be some time until TMS would land a deal for something a bit more lucrative. Not helping was that they had spent a lot of their budget on the short, and on top of that, Lupin was a bit more adult in nature given its gunplay, fistfights, and Fujiko fanservice. I mean, I'm not complaining about that, but considering that the competition was along the lines of, say, Astro Boy or Sally the Witch, Lupin was likely a bit of a harder sell to investors. However, in 1971, TMS would finally land a deal with the channel Yomiuri Television to create a TV series. This would finally air on the 24th of October of that year, and as an aside, because I'm sure everyone cares about this, that means I share a birthday with Lupin's first episode, so go me, I guess. Initially, Masaki Osumi, who worked on the pilot short, was on board as director, but due to alleged backdoor disagreements, he would eventually be replaced by a duo known as A Production. This consisted of two up-and-comers named Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, who went on to do absolutely nothing afterwards. Okay, except that. Kiyoshi Kobayashi returned from the pilot to voice Jigen once again, and retains the role as of the latest TV series and special here in 2019 as of this recording. Goronai and Chikao Otsuka also return, but their roles are swapped. Goronai voices Zenigata and keeps the role for the next 40 years. Chikao Otsuka ends up voicing Goemon, but just for this series. Fujiko is voiced by Yukiko Nikaido, someone who has seemingly vanished from acting after the 1970s. And last but not least, Lupin himself is voiced by Yasuo Yamada, a man who would come to define the role as his own and who would voice the character until his passing in the mid-1990s. In terms of music, I would probably describe this as a bit more down-key compared to what comes later, though still jazzy in nature. It does start the trend of the ending theme being somewhat more melancholy compared to most of the other tracks. Takeo Yamashita is the composer for this series, with Charlie Kosei providing vocals. And it should be noted that every vocal track seems to mention how Lupin uses a Walther P38, so if you ever forget what kind of gun he uses, just watch a few episodes of this series and it'll come back to you. There are 3 openings in this series, with the first 2 pulling a lot of animation from the pilots. The first opening recolours it to give Lupin a green jacket. The reasoning for this is that despite Monkey Punch drawing him wearing red, the writer and character designer for the series, Yasuo Otsuka, simply preferred the colour green. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The second opening would also give the audience a brief introduction to the cast and their roles. As for the third opening, it opts for a montage of clips from the series while the credits roll. And on that note, let's take a look at the first 4 episodes. It's a great day for a big race, so Lupin has entered into a Grand Prix on the Hida Speedway. He remains suspicious, so maintains contact with Jigen, who informs him Fujiko has infiltrated the nearby Miracle Hotel. He's right to be suspicious too, as the Japan Racing Alliance that organised the race are a front by the Scorpion Gang, led by Mr. X. Not that one. He anticipated Fujiko's infiltration and has her captured. That happens to her a lot. Mr. X explains that the race was set up to kill Lupin, literally sparing no expense as 5 billion yen was spent on it all. Lupin's too good for standard traps and anticipated that the other racers were imposters, but Zenigata is still on his tail. Taking advantage of a blind spot, Jigen swaps places with Lupin on the speedway and Lupin heads to the hotel. Disguising as a plumber, he smashes up the toilets to cause a flood and heads to where the Scorpions are waiting, and being flooded out. Lupin takes advantage of some live wires and fries everyone using the flood he caused, rescuing Fujiko. Switching back with Jigen, he tags all the opposing cars with small bombs and wins the race. The Scorpions try rigging his trophy, but he tosses it back at the last second and the whole thing goes up in smoke as Mr. X feels sure of his victory. In the last moment, Zenigata arrests Lupin and reveals that Fujiko sold him out in exchange for her own freedom, but Lupin has the last laugh as he leaves the inspector dragging the wreck of a car. Is this a good episode? I'll say yes with a but. The story is certainly entertaining enough, but this feels like something more from the middle of a series. We get a bit of short expository lines on who's who, but it feels like a lot has been pre-established. For example, who are the Scorpion Gang? We don't know, and this is their only appearance in this series, despite there being implied history between them and the gang. I'm told the manga is a bit better with its introduction chapter, but I'm sticking to the anime for the purpose of these recaps. I'll likely check it out to see the difference at some point anyway. Animation can be a bit stiff too, especially for a car race. There are a lot of very static shots, but this will improve as time goes on. That said, we do get a good idea of Lupin's deceptiveness and love of thrill, racing in this case, and we also get some insight on Zenigata's determination to catch Lupin, as well as Lupin's ability to always slip out of his grasp and leave him cuffed to who knows what. We open on a man who is gunned down in his sleep, and then gets right back up. It then cuts to Lupin and Jigen relaxing, though all is not well as Fujiko came to them the night before injured. As the two prepare breakfast, octopus not included, the man from before, Paikel, comes in looking for Fujiko and attacking them with a flame shot apparently coming from his fingers. As before, he's immune to their gunfire and takes Fujiko. Lupin follows, figuring a place called Enma Falls is a good starting point. Paikel demands the location of an item from her and tortures her using the waterfall his hideout is built over to interrogate her. Certainly a different way of waterboarding someone at any rate. The item, a microfilm, is in Lupin's car. Paikel attacks them again as they inspect the film, calling Lupin's bluff at destroying it, so Lupin and Jigen employ a strategic escape upon seeing him shrug off even an RPG. Not to mention them seeing him float above them as they run. Fujiko has also escaped in the meantime, and Lupin takes some time figuring out Paikel's tricks. The fire is simply a concealed flamethrower and the floating is glass. He's still trying to figure out the film when Fujiko arrives. Pleased to see her, he dives at her, but she removes the glass, though the knock to the head from the fall helps Lupin figure out the film. Paikel jumps Lupin in his car and demands the film, shooting him in the head and sending them off a cliff, though Lupin is still alive. Lupin tracks Paikel back to his hideout and reveals he found out the secret to the film, a chemical that grants immunity to bullets. Also fire. Paikel's coating is wearing off and he isn't able to shrug off the flamethrower, falling into the waterfall below. Back at Lupin's hideout, Fujiko gets angry that Lupin can't remember the formula, the film having been destroyed in the fight, so she leaves in a huff, putting up the glass as a parting gift. Paikel's an interesting enough villain, having a similar MO of trickery and deception to Lupin, and this episode also introduces Lupin's analytical abilities, going back to what I said about the same trick not working on Lupin twice. This episode also introduces the Nightman track, which really has to be heard to be believed. Seriously, go check it out sometime. And finally, we also learn that Lupin has a fear of the mighty octopus, so there won't be any crossover with Lupin and Spider-Man to battle Doc Ock. Lupin's more of a DC fan anyway. A night on a speedboat with Lupin and Fujiko flirting the best way they know how is interrupted by another oncoming speedboat. Lupin checks it out and discovers a woman who calls herself Linda. The two are shot at and this time it isn't flirting, but Jigen saves the day. In the confusion, Linda disappears with only a scent left behind. Jigen suggests they meet with a Dr. Heinlein, who Linda was an assistant to. Kinda feels like how Umbrella Corps only had one John working there, and everyone knew that he dated a woman called Ada. A surname would have helped here, I think. They do exist for a reason. Anyway, they're attacked by the same group from before, the Kirain Killers, or Killering Killers possibly. They manage to get away and take out a few as they leave. The next morning, they come ashore but notice how quiet it is. Lupin smells something and spots Linda in a flower field. They find Heinlein, who explains that the flowers, known as the Third Sun, can be used in creating a volatile fuel. On top of that, he used Linda in his experiment and her life force became tied to the flowers somehow. The killers are also after the flowers, and their leader Stern is very insistent that no one but him gets them, as Fujiko finds out for herself. Lupin catches up to her and they fight the killers, though a group also attack Heinlein's lab. Lupin tries to help but falls into a hole. Stern confronts him and asks for his help to search for their missing Third Sun powered warhead, but Lupin refuses. He also manages to escape by stealing Stern's outfit and disguising himself. Meeting back up with Jigen, Heinlein asks them to just torch the whole field, though this also ends up killing Linda in the process. Heinlein is shot, and with his dying breath gives Lupin the location of the warhead. Stern follows Lupin there, but so does Fujiko. Lupin plans to ride the missile back to Japan after removing the detonator, but when Fujiko stows away at the last second, their combined weight crashes the missile in the ocean and leaves them adrift. This was nonsensical at best. Lupin certainly got some rather out there stories to come, but this felt like too much too soon. It also didn't help that Linda really doesn't have much of a character, and for a supposed witch, she doesn't really do anything witch-like. On top of that, the art and animation is really rough in this episode, looking unfinished in more than a few places. Granted, this is because it was apparently around the time Osumi was fired, and I guess that didn't help production much. Though we do learn one thing from this episode, namely that if something innocuous has the potential to be nuclear fuel, it's probably going to be nuclear fuel. That seems to come up a fair amount in this franchise, oddly enough. A heist to steal a chest of gold coins goes south when Zenigata intercepts Lupin and guns him down, with tranquilizer darts. Lupin's okay, but his pride isn't. Jigen gets away with the chest, but Lupin has the key, and upon reaching the prison, Lupin starts yelling that he's not the real thing and accusing other guards of being him. Zenigata doesn't buy it, but he checks just in case. A year passes, as Fujiko repeatedly tries to break Lupin out for the chest, but constantly gets stopped by Jigen. Zenigata becomes confused and agitated as to why Lupin hasn't tried to escape, and why he's only yelling about being a fake. The day of his execution arrives, and Jigen finally cracks and tries to break him out himself, disguised as a priest that's been visiting the prison every day. Lupin tells him he still has a plan, however, and as everybody leaves, Lupin reveals a fingernail that's grown into a razor-sharp point and uses that to cut himself free. He asks for a shave as a last request, and jumps the guard that does so, dressing him in his prison garb. The guard tries to shout that he's not Lupin, but given that Zenigata's been putting up with this for a year now, he doesn't listen. Lupin lets slip on who he is by giving the wrong execution method, but he points out that someone's being executed right now, allowing him to escape uninhibited. Jigen finally takes Lupin to where he stored the chest, but in the year since it's become a construction site, and the chest is caught in an explosion. I suppose all you can do is laugh in a situation like that. This was honestly a great episode, and I personally feel that this should have been the first episode. It gives some insight into Lupin and Zenigata's relationship, not to mention just how far Lupin will go to troll Zenigata. It also shows that Lupin isn't unbeatable, though he'll always bounce back. Next time we'll be looking at episodes 5 to 8 and seeing the first appearance of the final member of the gang. Until then,